Thank you, Hockey Town. Always a Red Wing at heart. Sergei, Fedorov.
Man, I still got the chills, man.
Yeah, what an awesome video.
Man, that was an amazing video.
Amazing.
Shout out to the entire crew with the Red Wings for putting some of those videos together. And yes, my son is one of them. So that's pretty cool.
Shout out, Jack.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool for putting that together. A guy who has had a front row seat for so much of this. And look, if you consider yourself a hockey fan, even if you're not a hockey fan, I think the Russian Five is something that you should probably put into the queue if you have not read it yet. It is unbelievable. It really is. But
should be in the movies now.
Yeah,
again.
Joining us right now, the author behind that, and as I mentioned, a guy that had a front row seat, long time beat writer for the Detroit Red Wings, still pumping out books as well, pumping out knowledge, and we really appreciate him joining us. Let's welcome in Keith Gay, kindly joining us. Keith, really appreciate you joining us. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you. I love hearing your thoughts on Twitter. You can also follow Keith on Twitter. But a special day, Keith, and let's be honest, a day that I think a lot of people wondered when it was even going to happen and maybe if it was even going to happen.
Yeah, and rightly so. And frankly, Sean, when I heard the news that they were going to raise Sergei's number 91 to the rafters, the first thing I thought of was what happened to Marion. Because I didn't think we'd see this as long as she was drawing a breath. But somehow, some way, she put her fingerprints on it and authorized it, and she remains the principal owner of the organization. And it was her call in the end. And they're going to raise they're going to raise that number to the rafters tonight, and I'm pretty darn excited about it. It's well deserved. I can understand why the Ilitch family waited this long. There were a lot of bitter feelings for a long time over the way he left Detroit when he still had a lot of good years left, but they're getting it done tonight, and that's great.
You know, Keith, it is one of those things that, and I think you've immortalized it. I mean that in all sincerity with the Russian Five, but there's the grind line, there's A Miracle of Their Own, there's the book on Vlad. But this was such a special thing, and people have to remember, this was a time where not that many years beforehand, we weren't getting Russian players. They weren't allowed to come here. And to get this group together, and it was such a special group. I mean, you had legends that were maybe, out of their prime, still darn good players, but out of their prime. But to get a guy pre-prime and through his prime, that was unheard of back then.
Absolutely, it was. And you give Jim Lights, the former son-in-law of Mike and Marion Ilitch, a lot of credit for that. He and Nick Polano orchestrated that, the whole thing. Actually, their work started a few years before that when they orchestrated the defection of Peter Klima in 1985.
Yeah.
They figured out then how to get guys out from behind the Iron Curtain. And in 1989, 37 years ago right now, it'll be in June, when they decided they'd reached a plateau. They'd gotten so far building this franchise, but they were kind of running out of good players to draft. And Jimmy Devellano, give him credit too, he decided to take a chance. That, you know what, we're going to try and draft a Russian or two and see what happens. We may not get them out for 10 years, but we're going to give it a shot and see what happens. And they decided to draft Sergei in the fourth round. And Vladimir Konstantinov in the 11th round that year. Wow. And basically, Devellano turned to Lights at the draft table and said, "Okay, we got these guys. They're world-class players. You go get them out." And Jim Lights did.
Hey, Keith, thanks for coming on tonight. Look forward to seeing you later. Listen, this guy he's special. I own one jersey of the Red Wings, and it's a 91. To watch him, we were so lucky to get to watch him, and those back-to-back cups in 97, 98 was something. And when he was on the ice and those white skates, and he did everything. He was like the Michael Jordan of hockey when he came in. And this guy was unbelievable. But why the hell did the Red Wings let him get away?
Well, they tried like hell to keep him. They wanted to keep him. They in 2003 it was when he was negotiating another contract. They couldn't pin down. He was working with a couple of different agents at the time, and they just couldn't pin him down. And Mike Ilitch was getting very frustrated with the lack of progress. And he said, Jimmy D, Jim, and Ken Holland, I want you to get Sergei in here. The three of us are going to talk to him. We're going to get this thing done right now. Period. And they brought Sergei in. And Mike Ilitch did all the talking. He said, "Sergei, we want you to be a Red Wing for life. We don't want you to play anywhere else. Here's the deal: we're going to give you $10 million a year for 5 years, $50 million to finish your career in Detroit." And Sergei said, "Well, Mr. Ilitch, thank you very much. I'll think about it and get back to you." It shook hands and left. And Ilitch looked at the other two guys, Ken Holland and Jim Lights, and said, "Well, that's it. He's gone." And they said, "Well, Mr. Ilitch, he just said he's going to think about it and get back to us." Mike Ilitch said, "You don't have to think about an offer like that." Right. A couple of days later, he signed out in Anaheim with Brian Murray, his former coach in Detroit, for 4 years, $40 million to play for the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. He left $10 million on the table to leave Detroit. And that's why it's taken so long to get his banner up in the rafters.
Why do you think he did that, Keith?
I think he was getting a lot of bad advice, most of it from his father, Victor, I believe. I don't know this to be true, but Victor was always – I talked to Scotty Bowman about this a lot, and Scotty got a little frustrated with all the things that Victor was filling in the head of Sergei Fedorov. Sergei, you need your own team. You got to be the guy. You're always going to be in Steve Yzerman's shadow. You got to go get your own team. And I think that had most everything to do with it.
Wow.
Keith, I remember that night, and you have no reason to remember this, but we were doing a show and we had Pat Brisson on, and it was as it was coming close to midnight, as a matter of fact, as it were. It's so funny to hear you tell that Mr. Ilitch story, because the guy that I was working with, I don't know if you remember Greg Brady, he and I looked at each other and we were like, this guy's gone. Honestly, I firmly believe that through a myriad of things, I think that decision was made ahead of time. And if there's one thing, and you know better than just about anybody, if there's one thing that, at least the philosophy is, Mr. Ilitch didn't like disloyalty. Was that part of this? Was that, really the straw that stirs the drink, so to speak, here?
Oh, absolutely. I think so. I think the Ilitches as a family, as billionaire owners of sports franchises, of pizza franchises, and so on, it's been. I've heard story after story after story about how they value loyalty above all else. They value loyalty. They're willing to pay for loyalty. They were in Sergei's case. But when you show when you show some disloyalty, kind of like he did, they can hold a grudge for a long, long time. And they held it for all these many years.
Keith Gave kindly joining us, author, longtime beat writer. If you're a hockey fan, chances are you've listened, watched, or read what this guy has to say. There's no doubt about that.
What a night tonight will be.
It's an outstanding night. Keith, and I know this is going to sound cheesy, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How would you describe Sergei Fedorov to a young hockey fan that never got a chance to see him? Because, I grew up in an era where I didn't get to see Bobby Orr. And I would ask my dad about Bobby Orr. I have little memories of Bobby Orr as a Chicago Blackhawk. I remember watching a game, and it was one of the handful of games he played, and he was broken, or hear about Gordie Howe, or hear about Rocket Richard. And I would always ask my grandfather or my father, how would you describe Sergei Fedorov to a young fan that maybe never got a chance to see Sergei?
Well, I'll go back to before I even saw him play, Sean. It was shortly after the World Championships. It would have been 1989 when Steve Yzerman played for Team Canada that year, and he came back. And we're talking about some of the players. I said, "Tell me about this guy Fedorov," and Steve Yzerman said, "Oh, he's better than me. He's better than I." He's great. And so, the Wings wound up drafting the guy. I couldn't wait to see him play. And just watching the guy, I think Sergei Fedorov was the best player in the world for 4 or 5 years in the middle of his career. He could play all 5 positions. Alex Ovechkin has scored more goals than anybody, but don't call Ovechkin the greatest Russian hockey player ever in the NHL because it ain't even close. Sergei Fedorov could play all 5 positions on the ice. Scotty Bowman put him on defense when in '97 when they were winning the Stanley Cup. And Scotty told me, Keith, he's our best defenseman. If I kept him there, he'd win the Norris Trophy.
Jeez, amazing.
Alex Ovechkin couldn't find a defensive zone with a compass for most of his career.
Facts.
Sergei, we were so lucky. You talk about how everybody was on the edge of their seats every time he jumped over the boards for a shift. It was like that when Kirk Gibson went to bat at Tiger Stadium in the mid '80s. Remember?
Yeah.
I mean, we all stood up and couldn't wait to see what this guy was going to do with a baseball bat. Sergei was that way. Every time he touched the puck, he would take your breath away with his speed and skill and grace. And when Scotty, thank God, Scotty Bowman put these 5 guys together, the Russian 5, and gave us something unbelievable to watch in those few years when those guys were playing together. God, we were lucky here in Detroit, guys. We were lucky.
Never been a smarter hockey mind. I will go to my grave. Never been a smarter hockey mind than Scotty Bowman. Let me say
one more thing, if you would, please. I think if Sergei had stayed in Detroit and played his entire career here, his jersey would have been retired many years ago.
Yeah,
many years ago. And tonight's celebration might be the unveiling of a statue at Little Caesars Arena for Sergei Fedorov.
Yeah.
We're not going to see a statue for Sergei at Little Caesars. We should. The next statue built should be for Nick Lidstrom, by the way.
Yeah.
I'll get on that bandwagon right now. But it's nice that they're raising this number. Finally, it's going to please a lot of fans who got a lot of joy watching Sergei play. He's deserved it absolutely, and I'm very excited for Sergei.
I remember the 2020 game, the day after Christmas, home game against the Caps. I was working with Dan Dickerson, WJR. Dan gets called away because his wife Lori is having their baby boy. So Dan's like, "You got this, all right, okay." The guy goes out and scores 5 freaking goals, the winner in overtime. The only 5 goals they scored, all Sergei. And I had to interview him that night. I almost crapped myself that night. What a night!
That was a night. Absolutely. Sergei gave us a lot of those.
Keith, are you making your way down? I know what a busy guy you are. Are you going to have a chance to be in Little Caesars Arena tonight?
I wouldn't miss it. Guys. This is pretty special. It feels like full circle for me because as I wrote in the book, I had a little bit to do with Sergei getting over here in the first place, passing along that first secret message to him and Vladdy in Helsinki, Finland, about a few weeks after they drafted him. And it was basically I wrote a letter in Russian for Jim Lights saying, we want you to defect and come to play hockey in Detroit. We'll do whatever we need to do to get you here. We'll pay you the same money we're paying our captain Steve Yzerman, but let us know when you want to come over here, and we'll help you facilitate whatever it takes to get here. And so I had the first contact with those 2 guys, and all these years later, I get to see Sergei's number raised to the rafter tonight at Little Caesars Arena. It's a big night for me, guys.
Hey, there was no chat GBT back then. You wrote in Russian on your own, Keith.
I did. Yeah, I was a linguist in the Army for 6 years, working for the National Security Agency. So
that's fabulous.
I spent 3 years in West Berlin, keeping track of the bad guys on the other side of the wall.
Man,
unbelievable! You guys, if you haven't read it yet, I'm not just saying this. It's a phenomenal read. Keith, before we let you go, and anything else you're planning? We mentioned your books. Anything else you got in the hopper that you're working on?
Well, yes and no. I've been kicking around another book, just a bunch of stories behind the stories of the for the many years I covered the Red Wings, and a lot of other good stuff that I was privy to cover as a sports writer. I was at ringside the night that Holyfield got his ear bitten off by
Nice.
Tyson.
Yeah.
I was at Boston Garden when Vinny Johnson and Adrian Dantley bumped heads.
Oh.
That day. I feel like the Forrest Gump of sports writing sometimes. I've had a chance to be around all these really crazy, weird sporting events. 1987, when you remember the end of the season when they had to come back and beat Toronto, 5 games. Remember that comeback?
Oh, well, who can forget?
The last game of the season when Frank Tanana threw a 1-0 shutout to beat Toronto, and in the middle of the game, somebody threw an octopus over from the upper deck and on the first base side, landed by the on deck circle, by the Blue Jays.
Awesome.
And I got to hold a little news conference at the end of Tiger Stadium with all these out of town writers explaining what the octopus was all about in Detroit. At a baseball game.
Hearing that, like John Brophy, Hanlon, such a fun team. It really was. My gosh, such a
bunch of stories like that I want to tell. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? Keith, on a personal level, I always say, and I know DMAC agrees with me, I think that 87 team is almost forgotten in regards to making hockey prominent in this town again. I really do. I firmly believe that people forget how much fun that team was.
Well, you know what? 10 years later, I was covering Stanley Cup champions, and I'm grateful for Scotty Bowman to give us the opportunity to do that. But the most fun I ever had covering the Detroit Red Wings were those late 80s, those 2 trips to the Stanley Cup semifinals against Edmonton. It was so much fun watching this city get excited about hockey again. And, Mickey Redmond filling trains to go to Toronto for the second half of a home and home with the Maple Leafs. It got no better than that.
No doubt. Keith, continued success to you. Honestly, I say it again. If you haven't read The Russian 5 yet, shame on you. Keith, you are hockey covering royalty as far as I'm concerned, and really appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right,
pleasure.
Keith gave, and yeah, he was phenomenal. I mean, Sergei was one of those guys that
400 goals.
You don't see guys like that. You don't, and I couldn't agree with him more.
Isn't that something that he could have won the Norris Trophy on top of all of this if he had just played defense?
And Scotty dressed him, and he played defense.
Yeah.
Just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
Anna Kournikova.
Yeah. It's not a bad move.
Yeah, it's not bad at all.
Not a bad move.